Hi there everyone. It's 2023, a new year, but sadly, you are stuck with the same old me. Remember in a video I made last year where I said if I talk about plans I have for the future in my videos, then I'm almost definitely lying? Well, that still holds true. I had said that I wanted to plan to do the Age of Mage event that caps off my Age of Mage era, but after some consideration and I guess I would call them IRL complications, I'm going to be indefinitely postponing the event. Now, I would encourage you to look upon this in a positive light, because I would say it's entirely for positive reasons. My biggest reason for postponing the event is that I simply ran out of time and I don't feel like trying to half-ass or jam an event into a time slot where I just feel exhausted putting on the event. I'm currently recording this before a long weekend on a Friday that was actually my last day of work at my current job, and on Tuesday, I will be starting a brand new job that I am insanely excited about. Due to this, I feel like I needed some time to actually rest up and get ready for this new job, as I anticipate that I will be working harder than ever, at least since I started this channel. And that's perfectly alright with me. I signed up for this, and I'm going to be properly compensated for that hard work, and it's even on a project that I think is pretty incredible, so again, I don't mind. I do think this job will impact my ability to make videos though, and it's not like I pump these things out pretty quickly. But this is partially intentional too. I've been thinking for a while that I wanted to take more time between videos and put more effort into them. I guess what I'm really saying is that I kind of want to up my production value, and I think that's going to come at the cost of fewer videos but with more effort put into each one. On the bright side of content creation, I guess, I also got a Steam Deck this Christmas, which means I've actually been playing Elden Ring a ton more than I usually do, albeit mostly offline making builds. During the holiday break, I made 2 more builds for Elden Ring, and both are currently hovering around meta level. You'll see one of these builds in this video, the other needs more developing, a little bit more adjusting, and some demoing before I'm actually ready to start invading with it and making videos about it. So as I mentioned, the event was going to cap off the Age of Mage, right? Well, I think it's time we evolve the Age of Mage into something else. A new and thoughtful age for a new and thoughtful Rofo that is going to be doing some evolving and self-reflection in the next year. This isn't a departure from my trend towards mages. In fact, I think the next phase is just the natural evolution of all glintstone galaxy brains. But it's time I start asking myself better questions about my builds, start to scrutinize their effectiveness through reviewing more footage, and keeping my builds up to date with the current patches. I was doing some invasions the other day with a ton of my older builds, and found that not a lot of them were as effective or even as functional as they once were. While the patches that have come out for PvP have been overwhelmingly, I think, good for this game, they certainly have not been kind to quite a few of my builds, and so I think that they need updating, they need refinement. And that's what I intend to make this next age about, reflection and refinement. What that will look like, I have an idea, but I don't quite know exactly what it's going to be, and I don't want to define that right now. All I do know is that I'm going to try to experiment a little bit more and embrace it with an open mind. So consider this the current capstone to this phase of the Age of Mage, a meta mage. This is my Deathrite Shaman, which is a rune level 139 build. Its focus is on the Death's Poker, which I actually just treat as a second catalyst that casts 2.5 spells. Those spells then become that much more powerful when I use the Shard of Alexander. Yes, I caved, and I started using that talisman. I know. I've become the very thing I hate, yada yada. Whatever. Get ghost flamed. So this is supposed to be a Shaman of Death, a firekeeper of the kilns of the Deathrite birds who can harness the souls and spirits of the dead and convert them into hexes. The main focus of this build is Ghost Flame and Burst damage. You might think that I would want to use Ancient Death Rancor, since I'm at rune level 139 and have so many points to spare. But I've really found that Rancor Call does exactly what I want Ancient Death Rancor to do without requiring 24 Faith. What I want Rancor Call to do in the first place is be a large, slow-moving distraction that I use to set up other attacks, such as Adula's Moonblade, or just more Ghost Flame. Speaking of Ghost Flame, let's talk a little bit more about Death's Poker. I'm not really going to talk about its R2s, those are good and unique, and that's cool, and you know that. I'm not going to talk too much about its weird scaling. The Ash of War scales off of intelligence, and thus I have 60 intelligence. What I am really going to talk about is something that for some reason I feel like other Souls tubers haven't brought up enough, which is the L2-R1 trail of Ghost Flame, and how that is actually, secretly, the best aspect of this weapon. So So when playing through the entire game on this build, I kept killing all of my bosses using that trail of Ghost Flame, the L2R1. Hell, I even killed Millennia by kiting her slow edge walk through the Ghost Flame on the ground. It made the whole experience not that painful. And I kept thinking to myself the entire time, this is never really gonna work against real people and real players with real brains rattling around inside their real skulls. But as it turns out, I was very wrong. Very, very wrong. I thought that the entire point of Death's Poker was to blow people up with the L2R2. And as fun as that is, the true purpose of Death's Poker is to get hosts and their mouth-breathing summons to throw themselves into my patch of Ghost Flame on the ground. Everyone, and I mean everyone at meta, just presses L2. Like, that's all they press. But the funny thing about L2 is that it has a tendency to lock you into place, and in that time, my Ghost Flame will have reduced all L2 pressers' health to 0. That's right, everyone, the hard counter to L2 in the smash hit game of the year Elden Ring is L2R1. It is that simple. Nobody respects the Ghost Flame on the ground. Nobody. It's insane. It's like you're standing in a patch of fire that builds up frostbite on you, and you think, yeah, this is totally fine to stand in. I think part of this is that I have a ton of intelligence, so the Ash of War and the Ghost Flame created by the Ash of War does way more damage than normal, and then on top of that I have the Shard of Alexander that boosts that. I think that's what's happening. Either way, it kills people very, very quickly, and they are too stupid to realize that they are standing in a patch of Ghost Flame most of the time. The other part of this strategy is that I will often cast L2R1 and then maneuver myself to stand in said patch of Ghost Flame. That way, it either dissuades parties who have brain cells floating around in their heads from attacking me, or it just punishes the ones who don't possess said brain cells, who try to jump attack me and land themselves right into my special patch of ouchy flames. I've also started using Zamor Ice Storm to seal off doorways for a few seconds here and there. It does quite a bit of damage, but is mostly just a very large AoE that prevents anyone from approaching. I know I could hard swap to like the Zamor sword, I forgot exactly what it's called, but this is easier and it does a little bit more damage because again, I have a ton of intelligence. Back to Death's Poker real quick. Rendan, who is a YouTuber that I like a lot, mentioned this sort of thing in an earlier video of his, but there's a few tricky areas in certain maps in which ground-based Ashes of War don't travel. It seems that the Haligtree Town and Canopy have quite a few of said spots. So I guess my advice on this is to just know the textures of the map that you're invading in very, very well, which is a very hard thing to do in a game as big as Elden Ring. Sometimes in the Haligtree Town, I'll set up my L2R1 Garden of Angry Fire perfectly and be rewarded with greatswords obliterating my skull because the patch of fire just didn't appear where it should have. The last thing I felt like I really needed for this build was a staple of any high-level PvP mage, the Big Pew Pew. The Big Pew Pew, TM, is always useful for ambushes as a mage, hitting your opponents for way too much damage from off of their screen. It's been called many things. In the Dark Souls series, it was Crystal Soul Spear. In Elden Ring, there are a couple of different versions of this spell, one of which is Glintstone Comet Shard. I've opted for Night Comet, just because of the vibes and the color of the spell mostly. But either way, you're able to chain cast thousands of damage in a couple of seconds. It is great for ambushes, or people stuck on ladders, or just for people who refuse to roll. Either way, it's quite nice to be the mage doing the big damage for once. I also have other weapons I use on this build as well. For parties with actual grooves on their brains, I have a Cold Nagakiba with their name on it. Yes, a cold-infused Nagakiba with Spinning Slash. I guess we've really come full circle from the early days of playing Elden Ring on this channel. I also have a Cold Glaive with Chilling Mist because Chilling Mist has Hyper Armor and Burst Damage, and who doesn't love Hyper Armor and Burst Damage? That combo was the advice of many a Dark Souls 3 How to Invade build video, so it works well in Elden Ring too. I also have the Death Ritual Spear, but I'm not that crazy about it. Yes, it has those good partisan R2s, but that doesn't make up for its poor damage and just okay Ash of War. I've instead turned to using yet another cold infused weapon, this time the Godskin Peeler with Ice Spear as its Ash of War. Ice Spear does good damage. Yeah, that's what it does. I rarely use it because Death's Poker is just a lot more fun, but I do love putting Ice Spear on a Twin Blade. It makes me feel like a baton twirler, twirling that weapon around and then shooting a Ice Spear out of it. I don't know. It's goofy, it's campy, it works well for this build. I did want to address one thing from earlier. If you've been watching my videos since the Dark Souls 3 days, you'll probably have noticed that I pretty much never play at meta in these games. There's a lot of reasons that go into that, like the fact that I don't find people who only play at meta particularly fun, or the fact that in past games you needed to go into New Game Plus in order to make a meta character. I also always just disagreed with the idea of the meta being 120 to 125 in the past, especially in games where you'd wrap up a normal New Game playthrough at around soul level 80 or 90. The idea that you need to have a build that hits multiple soft caps was always a little ridiculous to me. Like, builds can have downsides, and that's part of making a build. But anyways, in Elden Ring, things are a little different, especially now that the arenas are open. Maybe it's just me or the PC community at the moment, but I've found way more co-opers playing through the game at rune level 139 than the usual boil prawn shack type duelists or dedicated gankers. Meta ranges are kinda nice now, I really don't mind them. And considering that mid-ranges from around rune level 40 to rune level 80, which used to be my bread and butter, are kind of the worst level ranges for invasions due to incredibly poor balancing of overleveled summons, I don't mind hanging out at meta these days. At rune level 139, everyone is an overleveled phantom, which just kinda evens out the playing field. Sure, it makes build making a bit less interesting because you can really just dump points into damage stats thoughtlessly, and it'll still be effective, but the quality and ridiculousness of the invasions is much higher at those levels. And why else are we invading if not for the ridiculousness? So yeah, I anticipate in the future I'll be making quite a few more meta level builds, or even beyond meta. There's been a lot of talk of rune level 200, and while I haven't made a build for that range, and I can't really speak from experience yet, it looks pretty fun, so I might give that a try in the future. So there is no Age of Mage event on the horizon at the moment, now that we're entering a new era with this channel, but there are actually a couple events happening in the near future for the FromSoft community. The Dashing Saint has an event coming in late February that I'm also gearing up for. There's going to be a meta PC tournament that I'm not sure if I'll be participating in, but there is a mid-level arena brawl event with many player-created covenants. Myself, Iroth, and the letter M have assembled a team called Those That Live Within Mist, where we are cosplaying as Deathrite worshippers or champions of Fia. But most importantly, we'll be using Mist-type spells. The Mist idea was largely M's, and the Deathrite aspect of it was largely because I was putting together my meta Deathrite Shaman at the time, and wanted to keep the spooky vibes going. That's not to say you can only use Mist-type spells, but you must at least use, like, one of them. And there's plenty of Mist spells, Ashes of War, or even Thrown Pots that you can consider Mists. There's Freezing Mist, Fia's Death Mist, Poison Mist, Night Maiden's Mist, the Ash of War Chilling Mist. Hell, I'd even consider Volcano Pots a very spicy kind of mist as well. There are a lot of options here, you just gotta use one of them. I made the Covenant requirements pretty vague on purpose this time because I wanted to make it as easy as possible to join. It allows for quite a variety of builds and interpretations, and I'm hoping you all take advantage to really express yourselves and dive into that good death lore. Just remember to use a mist and give yourself a lore name that can relate back to Fia's champions or the Deathrite worshippers, and you're all set. I should also mention, and the most important part of this covenant, which is that the charity we're raising money for is Hoppy Relief, and an organization that provides medical supplies and general relief to the indigenous Hoppy people of Arizona. If you want more details on Dashing's event, Russ Bucket actually made a much better video explaining everything while I was editing this video, so go watch that for more details. Rust also recently interviewed me about the Those That Live Within Mist Covenant, and he made a really fantastic video on it, so I'll link that in the description, or you can click on a card on the screen or something. It is a fantastic video, please go check it out, it's quite excellent. I have yet to fully put together my build for this event, but I have it pretty much entirely planned out. It's going to be a bit of a callback to one of my earliest Elden Ring builds, but fitting into the theme of our Covenant. I'm really excited about it, might make a video in the coming weeks since I have quite a bit of time between now and February 25th. And the last event I wanted to talk about is the annual Return to Lordran. For those of you who don't know, or who maybe started playing from Softies with Elden Ring, the Return events are times when the community will make an effort to play through the older Souls games on a new character. Just want to go back real quickly. Some of you might have heard me use the term from Softie, instead of some other, mouth breather term like Soulsborne Akira Ring, and I absolutely refuse to say that. That's Deracine Erasure. And with Armored Core on the horizon, how the hell are you bozos going to shoehorn that into the unholy amalgamation of nouns and adjectives that is Soulsborne Akiro ring. It's from Softies. Yes, it sounds like an ice cream based dessert. If anything, that makes it even better. Anyways, moving on. Return to Lordran refers to the setting of Dark Souls 1, so people will be starting new characters, placing their signs down for co-op, and invading, which really recreates the feeling that these games had around launch. And now with Dark Souls 1's servers being restored and multiplayer being populated, now is a great time to get into that game if you haven't before. I'm not planning on doing anything special for the Return to Lordran, just going to make a new build around soul level 50 and invade a lot. Might make some videos on it, might not, we'll see. If you are interested in getting into Dark Souls 1, Saint Riot is definitely your guy, although I don't believe he's doing anything in particular for this year's Return to Lordran. In the past, I have not really given Dark Souls 1 PvP a fair shake at any point really, and while I'm making an honest effort to now, I really wouldn't say that I have any good opinions or in-depth knowledge about it in the slightest, so maybe take my thoughts on this with a grain of salt. But if you are looking for demonstrations on how DS1 PvP can be fun or even at its best, especially with an active online community, I'd refer you to the run that Saint Riot and Pincognito did like 2-3 years ago that they deemed the Nightmare Run. It's essentially a grave-lorded, perma-dried fingered run through New Game Plus and Dark Souls 1. And it's a fantastic series that also teaches you some general best practices of DS1 PvP. If you didn't understand the term grave-lorded, perma-dried finger run, that's okay. It's a lot to explain, and I don't really feel like explaining it. But I definitely recommend watching that series, and it will all be explained there. Link is in the description. It's just a little window into how great Covenants used to be in From Softies and how they've been totally sidelined in favor of simplicity in more recent games like Elden Ring. So yeah, that's what I've been up to, that's what's happening with this channel in the next coming months, and hopefully I'll see you guys soon. I'd say going forward, expect less frequent uploads, but ideally I'll put a lot more effort and I guess production value into those uploads. I hope your 2023 is everything you all hope it will be and more. But that's all from me guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.